Sasha, my dear. How are
Hello.
you?
Great to see you.
How are things there? Are the tulips out yet?
Sorry, the tulips are, I think they should be out pretty soon around this time. Yes. We, we are, yes, we're quite liberal here. We can walk on the streets and in a combination of two people or a family, you know, so it's quite okay.
The first time my encounter with Sasha, I will always remember this because I was in Belfast and we got the meeting, you know. We were going to do actually Rack 3 as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then we come and of course we have to say, okay, let's, you know, hi, welcome here into Belfast. It was raining, of course, the normal thing. And then we said, okay, let's dive into music. And he started playing this absolutely phenomenal command. And okay, and I will do this in here and there. And it was this beautiful creative connection that it just happened. It felt so natural. We were speaking the same language. And I remember the rehearsals, we were just going, and of course Sasha comes with this amazing aura and power, and comes, and Rachmaninoff, we know, is always sometimes has a little bit complication with the orchestration. Sometimes with the orchestra than the piano. With Sasha is all the time. Was with the orchestra, I look at the orchestra was completely mesmerized. I remember looking at Tamas, my concertmaster, and I was like, this guy is phenomenal. Like, I know. And I start making the orchestra to play louder, and Sasha sound just get bigger and bigger. And this is phenomenal. We don't have to be like, oh no, this, we're just an absolute wonderful conversation. And I, you know, fell in love with him immediately.
No, it's a mutual thing, and I must say that this was one of those experiences where the less one says, the better, because there was just a natural kind of understanding on some kind of on a level which didn't need words, you know. And I just remember being so inspired by that special energy. And I remember that I didn't even feel like I had to look at you, Rafa, at all, because I could feel what you're doing, and it was so inspiring, and it just kind of worked like this, you know, mutual kind of bond that's then communicated to the concert hall. It was really very inspiring for me, and I remember this very, very clearly. You know, any performer, the biggest inspiration is the conductor and the orchestra, because it's the symphonic layer, you know, the symphonic structure that can be the best teacher for the pianist to create the layers in the music. So for me, it was precisely that, the colors that I heard from your side, from the orchestra, the layers and the communication, and then, you know, to become part of that communication, to make chamber music instead of a soloist versus accompaniment, you know. So the chamber music scenario is the one which usually you have to work for to achieve. But in that case, it happened. It was there. It was there immediately, and I remember I was very grateful.
Rag 3 is one of those concertos for conductors that we're afraid of. You know, every conductor will say, "Oh, Rag 3," or like Chopin. Oh my God! Okay, the layers in the orchestra are quite thick. The part in the piano, as we know, is very virtuosic, and there's always a line going in between with a fugue and a wonderful display of virtuosity, everything that it should be heard. And of course, sometimes conductors, especially when we're making accompaniment, we try to have, you know, the vertical part. We are not behind. So the soloist doesn't have to hold themselves, but they could actually just flow. If the soloist has to wait until if it's going this way and the orchestra is here, the soloist will have to retract and you already lose the way of talking. It's like you'll be doing this, you know. It's much better when you just speak, and we could be that. So of course, going the Rachmaninoff way, how it goes, and clarinet things and the little colors in there, you always have a little bit, when you see the score, you get a little freaked out about it, because like, oh my God, I had to be in here, and let's see if let's say the winds are going to be a little bit too late, or the brasses are going to be a little bit too loud, or they are going to react a little bit into this. So these are the neurotic part of preparing the score.
I feel that this concerto is a symphony more than a concerto. This is really a symphony or a chamber piece with 100 musicians, you know. Really, you know, this was premiered in the US, actually, in New York in 1909, I think. And this was the first time for Rachmaninoff to be there. It was his first trip, and so it was in a way his contribution or his kind of his reflection about his environment back home. He put his whole soul into this piece, and it was really such an intimate music. You know, he was joking with Horowitz, saying that he wrote it for the elephants. You know, he said, "I wrote this for the elephants," but in Russian it has a slightly different meaning than in English, elephants. So a slightly different shade. And I think this music is, in the first place, an absolutely intimate reflection of his inner world and his inner understanding of the environment back home, the cultural background, you know, the inspiration he himself had from people like Tchaikovsky, for example, you know, or choral music, or church music, and you know, things like that. But it's extremely difficult if this natural feeling with the conductor and the orchestra is not there by itself. This beginning is the soul of the concerto. It's the essence. It's like, you know, once I had a concert where I played this concerto, but it was preceded by one of the Vespers by Rachmaninoff. So the concert began with one of these beautiful Vespers by Rachmaninoff, and the choir walked through the whole concert hall singing the Vesper, and then the orchestra began playing the beginning, and the piano became the theme, which in itself sounds very much like a choral, like a Vesper. So it really matched so perfectly, and it was kind of very organic, you know. So that, for me, that explained the meaning of this beginning of the concerto, this Vesper that I heard before the beginning. Rachmaninoff himself didn't agree that it was necessarily inspired by chant. He says, no, the melody composed itself, but maybe indirectly, you know, it was. I don't know what you think, Rafa.
Maybe I totally agree with you. Yeah, absolutely. One beautiful, fantastic moment is when it gets into the recapitulation of in the second movement, when it comes back to how it starts the movement after going through these whole trips, and they go like, it's just after you're being expanded to this fantastic world, you just go really now almost to a prayer and a very intimate thought. It's fantastic. I mean, if I cannot pick one moment, but this is the one that is coming to my head at this moment. Yeah.
You know, somehow in this concerto, there's always a feeling that he is, there's this big battle between the really darkness and suffering and heavy sorrow and heavy Russian soul. And on the other side, hope, joy, and glory of the goodness, of kind of the overpowering feeling of love, you know. And so this kind of huge contrasts, you know, that come together and form this nuclear connection, you know. That's throughout the whole concerto. And so you have these sections which overpower each other with either the beauty or the darkness. And it's this fascinating you know, duality in this concerto that is always there. But for me, the cadenza of the first movement, you know, is definitely one of those kind of judgment days moments, you know, before we have the glory of the climax on the third movement, where we have finally the answer to all the suffering. But in the first moment, it's the judgment day of the cadenza, and you hear the atmosphere bending around it because it is so powerful, you know. I moved to Australia when I was a young boy. I moved from Ukraine. Ukraine back then was a very Russian kind of country. It had Russian language, it had Russian music, Russian everything, you know. So I grew up with this Russian culture being around me. Well, grew up, I was 13 years old when I left, so I was still a boy. But my childhood happened there, and it kind of gave me those foundations, you know, of intuitively connecting to those Russian vibes, you know, the Russian reflections. And when I went to Australia, of course, I missed my parents, I missed home. So for me, Rachmaninoff was the music which, for me, was the connection to what I missed. Somehow it became very personal. So Rachmaninoff for me was the symbol of, you know, the good things that I remembered from my personal life in childhood. But Rachmaninoff by himself, independently, I think he was definitely a composer that created a complete revolution in the world by how much he stretched the horizons of expression, how much he composed. He composed straight from the heart. His music is so communicative to people all around the world. Doesn't matter which culture, which language, which background, it completely erases any differences, and it speaks directly to your soul, and this is the power of Rachmaninoff. Somehow he was the person that had a huge heart, and you can feel it in his music. He has such depth, but also such delicacy and elegance about himself. It's quite, I think we as humanity are fortunate that he lived.
In my case, and many of my colleagues and countrymen from Venezuela, we have a very strange connection with Russian music. I don't know where it comes from, actually. But it's we have always have that kind of line in El Sistema, what I got brought up. We played a lot of Russian music and German music, but the Russian is almost like it's not that we actually understand the language itself, but when we play Russian music, it feels like we will be speaking Spanish. I mean, it's this warm hug and talking from the soul, and especially with Rachmaninoff, that is fantastic. That is always, it's not fake. It's completely honest, and it doesn't matter how vast it could go, that sometimes it reach, the arms are far too stretched. It doesn't matter. He just goes for that, and it's that this honesty was the thing that kind of get me close to his music. It makes me feel alive. There's something very special about being in the hall and having an audience, because I mean, you could use, let's say, a program and make the music and write it down in a computer, and it's not going to be the same, even though it will sound perfect, because it will be, everything will be exactly at the right place. But that is not what music is about. Music, it's like a living organism that it depends on the moment and the way you breathe, the way the air has, the way at that moment you decide not to take this path but the other one. I mean, there are so many things that are dependent on actually being present at the moment. And this is why it's so, now that we have been deprived for all the circumstances, we could see and we will appreciate much more when we come back together, because every single little thing that sometimes we take it for granted as like, yeah, fine, then we realize like, no, it's an actual joy and privilege that we could actually make music together.
It's one experience when you are by yourself and you come to a new place somewhere and you see something very beautiful, very unique, and you are impressed by that, you're touched by that. But it's a completely another experience when there's someone, one of the loved ones, one person that you love next to you, and you share that beauty with that person. That suddenly multiplies by 3 times, that experience. That's what I notice when I travel. If I come to a beautiful place, yes, I will go and see, and it's but if only my wife was with me that time, and we could share this beauty and together. Because I think ultimately probably we are designed that way. We're designed to share, we're designed to cooperate, we're designed to work together and to experience together. So I think this is one of the things about music concert hall. Audience come there, they come from different homes, different backgrounds, different histories, different everything. And we're so used to functioning in everyday world where we have to meet each other's differences. We have to somehow work with each other's differences. We have to find common language. We have to achieve certain things. But in the music hall, those differences stop existing. The music communicates to people without the need to address that layer of our existence, those differences. So it kind of communicates to the layer under it, where there's no need for it. It just communicates directly, and the people feel connected without anything else involved. And so for me, this is, I think, one of the reasons why people want to come to the concert hall. It's not the same as watching it online. No? I mean, Yeah, I can't wait to go back.